Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, September 6th. We just had one of the best openers to an NFL season that I can remember in a very, very long time. We'll talk about all the craziness that led up to the climactic final play between the Ravens and the Chiefs to kick off the 2024 NFL seasons. We'll also go through every single game this weekend, except for the Monday night game, which we'll save for Monday. We're going to preview every single one of them, talk about who I have winning, why I have them winning, which upsets I have. There are 4 upsets and 2 others that I think are on upset alert. Then we're going to take a look at the college football schedule. We're going to take a look at some of the biggest games, 10 of the biggest games and or upset alerts that I wanted to talk about today. Make sure we hit all of those before hitting our famous, world famous Sports by GSMC Podcast Network MLB Power Rankings today. We're going to do a quick look around the world of baseball as we are coming up right to the end of it. It's getting kind of crazy there too. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the craziness that was week 1 of the NFL season. The first opening game of the NFL season, I should say. And it started off with a bang. I cannot think of a better week 1 opening kickoff game, at least in recent memory. Last year's was pretty good, but this one came down to the wire. It came down to the last play. It came down to the last foot. It came down to the last toe. This game was awesome to watch. We got to see 2 teams that definitely are at the top of the league in a tight competitive AFC. Obviously, it ends with the Kansas City Chiefs, the 2-time defending Super Bowl champions, winning 27-20 over the Baltimore Ravens. This game was everything you could have asked for. It had, again, that ending that came down to the wire. It had a comeback as well. It had some penalties, some controversy, and we're going to get into all of it, starting off with Baltimore. And there were a lot of things to take away from this game from the Baltimore side of things. Aside from the fact that you start off 0-1, we're going to start off with the positives here. The defense looked really good, going up against a really good Chiefs offense, which we'll get to. Their revamped offensive core with the new wide receivers and those weapons, they look kind of unstoppable. It doesn't look very fun, but the Ravens were able to hold them on multiple drives in the red zone to field goals. Props to them. That's a positive. Another positive, Isaiah Likely really came out and showed what he can do, and we'll get into a little more of Isaiah Likely in a little bit. But the negatives, before we get there, Lamar Jackson. I'm going to talk a little bit about the stuff Lamar Jackson didn't do good, but I want to preface this with the fact Lamar Jackson was awesome. Lamar Jackson was the only reason the Ravens were in this game. He rushes for 122 yards. The 14th time in his career he's rushed for over 100 yards. That's 4 more than anybody else in the history of the NFL at his position. It's ridiculous what he does. He was playing, with physicality on the ground, and it's not what you want to see out of your quarterback if you're the Ravens, but he played like the best player on the field, and he was the best player on the field last night. Now to get to the part that wasn't very good. The Ravens offensive line. The Ravens offensive line was an issue, and it always was going to be the question of this game. We talked about it yesterday when we were previewing it a little bit. The Ravens had 3 new starters. They brought in a bunch of different guys, were transitioning through them, and Chris Jones was destroying them. It almost looked like they were just letting Chris Jones have a free path to the quarterback. And again, this is where I want to point out Lamar Jackson again. There were very few sacks given up last night by the Ravens, and that's because of the pocket presence by Lamar Jackson, his ability, and you can really see it down the stretch, especially in those last 3 plays when Chris Jones basically it's a free rush and you're leaving, a running back to block. Not what you want to do as a team, but Lamar Jackson keeps his eyes downfield, is able to avoid the rush, just moving up and down in the pocket to give his running back a chance. This is not the way that they want it done, but Chris Jones looked like a defensive player of the year candidate last year. He should be in that conversation last night. He should be in that conversation. Chris Jones was a game wrecker. And this went a lot of different ways with the Ravens. The Ravens on their first drive, it was a lot of fun. They got Derrick Henry involved. They gave it to him 6 times on the first drive. He scored the first touchdown of the NFL season. It was just the right kind of game plan that you want to see out of this Ravens team. They come out in the second drive after giving up a touchdown to Xavier Worthy, who Xavier Worthy looked awesome last night. I can't believe the Bills traded that pick to let the Chiefs draft Xavier Worthy. He is going to be a problem for the rest of the NFL. 2 touchdowns on 3 touches, that 21-yard rush on the end around where he barely got touched, rushed past the entirety of that Baltimore defense, and then a wide open touchdown where Marlon Humphreys lets him run past him. No one's going to catch up to Xavier Worthy. He did his thing last night as well. But then the Ravens got away from the run game. And I think that's where they messed up because they went down the field with the run game. I understand when you're down 10 points and you're in a 2-minute drill, you're not going to put Derrick Henry in the game. You're going to leave that to your third down back, right? But when they were the most effective in this game is when Lamar Jackson was doing play actions with Derrick Henry. You saw just the gravity, the pull that Derrick Henry has on these Chiefs defenders, the Chiefs defense that looked really good last night as well. The biggest plays, the plays over the top when they weren't throwing screen pass after screen pass after screen pass was off of play action. You had the linebackers step up. They went into run mode for a second. Then you were able to loft the ball over their heads and get it to the open guy cutting across the middle. It worked on the first drive. And then they just got away with it. They got away from it. Derrick Henry carried the ball another 7 times all game. 6 times in the first drive, 7 times the rest of the game. And this is kind of what they fell into in the AFC Championship game. They ran out of what they were doing. They stopped running the ball. And that is not what you want to do against this Chiefs team. You want to play your brand of football. And they got caught up in, we need to beat them at their game. The Ravens need to beat them with the Ravens style of football, and they have yet to do that in their last 2 matchups. Lamar Jackson was awesome. Now getting to those that last sequence, those last 3 plays, because that is what this game came down to. The Ravens were down 10 in the fourth quarter after basically being down a possession the whole time. They get a field goal, kick it off to the Chiefs, are able to hold them. They get the ball with 2 minutes left and no timeouts. Lamar Jackson drives 90 yards down the field to get them into a position after a beautiful deep connection with Rashad Bateman down the sideline. The Ravens have, in my opinion, what was their first mistake. They did not clock the ball. The Ravens had no timeouts. Rashad Bateman catches the ball with 36 seconds to go. They don't get a snap off until there is 20 seconds to go, and then that play takes 10 seconds. So you're looking at a 25-second runoff as opposed to, Spiking the ball, you don't have to get people set. You just have to get them on the line. You probably have an extra 5 seconds to work with. And I know the argument is saying, hey, you're losing it down anyway. You want to get them on their toes. And to be fair, on that play, Isaiah likely was open in the back corner of the end zone. If Lamar Jackson is able to put just a little bit less air on that ball, maybe get it there with a little bit more power on it, he is going to score a touchdown on that play and win. Instead, he comes down hard on what looked like a shoulder and has to miss the next play. And then we get into one of the more interesting plays of the whole game, which was the one where, again, you had Chris Jones get through the backfield immediately. Hill blocking, not the guy you want on him, but Lamar Jackson is able to run around in the pocket and keep the defenders blocked as just by moving up and back in the pocket, which is very impressive. It's one of the most impressive things I've seen done with pocket movement in a very, very long time. Justice Hill, not the right matchup for Chris Jones, but he did a very, very commendable job on those last 2 plays especially. But Zay Flowers flashes wide open across the middle, and it looks like he just misses it. Now, in the post-game interview, and this is something I thought that was really interesting, Lamar Jackson said he wasn't even targeting Zay Flowers. He said he was targeting Rashad Bateman, who, if you go and look at that replay again, Rashad Bateman was in the front line of the end zone. So he airmailed the ball to Rashad Bateman. He was trying to do a jump ball play. Probably not the right one. He said he saw Zay Flowers after he let go of the ball, and if he had, it would have worked, because Zay Flowers, if you remember, wide open. No one near Zay Flowers. No one was coming anywhere near those guys. He just a little bit too far to the right of Zay Flowers. They don't connect. And then we get to the heartbreaking part. There's 4 seconds left in the game. Ravens last snap. Lamar Jackson, once again, immediate pressure from Chris Jones. Justice Hill has to do his thing and block one of the best pass rushers in all of football. And again, he does a really good job of that. I'm very impressed by his pass blocking and what he had in this game. He finds Isaiah Likely, in the back of the end zone. Looks like he catches it. Unfortunately, his toenail, the tip of his shoe is out of bounds. And that's where the game ends. It also brings up an interesting point. If that touchdown had counted, it looked like they were going to go for 2. And I am of the mindset that that was the right decision. I've heard pushback on that from other people. Some people say, hey, you don't need to go for 2 in that situation. Just take it to overtime. But the Chiefs their offense had been going up and down on the Ravens all night. And, the way that Mahomes in overtime seems to go, you don't want to give him the ball. I like that. I think, honestly, they would have gotten it. If it was me, I would have just handed it to Derrick Henry and seen what happened. But the way they were doing it, I'm not sure if they would have. That offensive line needs some work. This is a team that's going to get better. Now, I don't want to go too hard on the offensive line because, again, a lot of the trouble came with Chris Jones, who is one of the best defenders in all of football. A disruptive force if there ever was one. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about is the usage with Derrick Henry. I know I kind of touched on it a little bit, but he only had 13 carries, half of them on that first drive, and 3.5 yards per carry. Although you could see when they were giving him the ball in the second half, the very limited amount of times that they did give it to him, he was starting to break off runs. He was starting to break off runs of 5-6 yards, whereas before he was getting 1-2 yard runs. It was starting to wear down that defense, a defense that was visibly tired by the end. If they had pounded the rock with Derrick Henry 5-6 more times in this game instead of throwing a screen pass to Zay Flowers, which it's a fine method of offense, but I don't want that to be the main method of offense. If you're going to just do that, I'd prefer you run the ball completely, honestly, because Derrick Henry is going to wear down that defense a way that Zay Flowers is not going to be able to do. Giving him the ball more, I think they would have been able to get something done, but they were able to get down the field, and they were able to score technically. They were just that close. This was an awesome game, and that's my biggest takeaway. This game was exactly what we were waiting for after 200-some days of no football. We finally got a game, and it was everything we could have wanted. Kansas City is going to be amazing this year. It's a little scary, honestly, because they won a Super Bowl last year, and that offense is night and day. getting to Kansas City, we haven't even gotten to them at all in this segment. Kansas City, my goodness, look at what their offense looks like. That defense, phenomenal. I thought they would take a step back once they lost L'Jarius Sneed, but no, their replacements came in, knocked down a couple passes, had a couple PBUs, almost had an interception. You still have Trent McDuffie, a guy that I really love. His physicality and ability to cover guys is hard to find in corners nowadays. And of course, all the love I've been heaping on Chris Jones, but also George Karlaftis, the rest of that defensive line, the linebacking core. They did a really, really good job in this game, containing as much as you could a very explosive Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely team, right? But getting to the offense, this wasn't a great Mahomes game. Mahomes had one or two plays, and that's about it. Travis Kelce wasn't his game. Xavier Worthy comes through and does his thing. Xavier Worthy, 2 touchdowns, 2 catches, 1 rushing touchdown, right? It's ridiculous that he fell to them. And you take a look at the night and day difference with this receiving core, especially the speed, the amount of space they're able to get over the middle. They were killing them with that quick slant, that slot slant that they kept doing, or short post, I guess you might call it, with Rashee Rice lined up against a linebacker. That felt like that was the only play they were running the entirety of the second and third quarter, especially because they kept getting that one-on-one matchup with the linebacker. Rashee Rice, you partner him up with Hollywood Brown when he comes back. You have Xavier Worthy, you can do whatever you want with his speed. There's very few guys in the league that can just cover that. Speed is a weapon. Speed kills. And then you're also going to get Hollywood Brown back. You have Justin Watson. You have Juju Smith-Schuster. This offense is going to be a machine. Isaiah Pacheco just never stops moving. It's incredibly impressive what this Chiefs team is able to do. I was trying not to, honestly, I was trying to be a little lower on the Chiefs this year, but they impressed me so much. It's going to be so hard for anyone to knock them off. That Ravens team is one of the best teams in football, and they looked like they were outmatched at basically every level of the game, even though they only lost by 7. But let me know what you think of this game. I thought it was awesome, an awesome way to kick off the NFL season. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at the rest of the NFL slate aside from Monday Night Football. All 14 games, including tonight's between the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We'll talk about all of that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. It is Friday, September 6th. I appreciate all of you guys spending your Friday afternoons with me. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over an incredible Week 1 kickoff game between Patrick Mahomes and the two-time defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs and the reigning AFC championship losers, reigning MVP Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. An incredible game that came down to as close as you possibly can to overtime. Literally a toenail out of bounds. What a great way to kick off the NFL season. We're going to continue on this NFL train in this segment, predicting the next 14 games of the slate, all of them in week one other than the Monday Night Football, which we will reserve for our show on Monday. So in this segment, we're going to talk about the Green Bay Packers taking on the Eagles tonight, as well as all 13 games on Sunday. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, spending your Friday afternoon talking some sports with me. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our predictions for week one of the NFL season. Starting off with tonight's game in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the first game in NFL history taking place in South America. It's going to be a great game. Jordan Love, the newly minted $55 million man, taking on Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, and the Eagles. It's going to be a lot of fun tonight. I cannot wait. This game currently has the Philadelphia Eagles favored by 2.5 points. This is going to be an interesting one. I did say in the intro to the whole episode, I have 4 upset picks. We're going by the spread to see if they're upsets or not. Because in my mind, every game I pick is not an upset because I think they're going to win it. But the Green Bay Packers just made it to the second round of the playoffs. The Philadelphia Eagles are coming off of a collapse at the end of their season. They went 10-1 to start last season, finished off 1-6, including a loss in the playoffs. And cracks were forming between their quarterback, their head coach. They fired their defensive coordinator, which was the right move. Vic Fangio should come in and shore up that defense a lot more, than Matt Patricia was doing. That being said, I still think there is some sort of divide in that Eagles locker room. And winning cures all, but it's going to take a bit to heal because reports that I've heard, and I'm not sure how true they are, so take this with a grain of salt. Nick Sirianni, the head coach, and quarterback Jalen Hurts cannot be in a room alone together. And that is not a good thing. You need to be able, your quarterback and your head coach need to be able to work together, regardless of how involved in the offense the head coach is. That's just something that needs to be able to, that's just the relationship that needs to work. And right now, that's not happening. So all of that being said, I am taking Green Bay tonight, 31-28. Hello, Anthony. Welcome into the show. Moving on to Sunday. The first game on the slate for Sunday, hitting the 1 o'clock games, we have Minnesota heading to New York to take on the New York Giants. The Giants and the Vikings are in kind of similar situations, at least quarterback-wise. You know, you talk about a team that's not expecting this year to be this quarterback this year to be the guy. Next year, they expect to have that guy. Daniel Jones is technically on a contract year for the Giants. Last time on his contract year was also the last time they played the Vikings. They beat them in the first round of the playoffs. Sam Darnold comes into New York this time, still toting a lot of great weapons. This game is going to be interesting. I think what this game is going to come down to is that interior offensive line for the Vikings going to be able to hold up against the pass rush of Dexter Lawrence? Is that offensive line going to be able to hold up against this really, really good defensive line? Now, the corners for the Giants aren't the greatest. They do re-sign Adoree Jackson later in the offseason, but they have a healthy Jordan Addison that came out today. The Vikings, of course, have Justin Jefferson. They should cook. The question is, will Sam Darnold be the guy? I personally don't know if they will. I think this is going to be a very low-scoring game. I think it's going to be more incompetence on the offense's part than the defense for why it's a low-scoring game. I'm taking the Giants in my second upset of the week to win 17-20. Right now, Minnesota is favored by 1.5 points, although I could see this one very easily going in Minnesota's favor. Anthony asks, he says, in a previous show in the NBA, but he couldn't answer this. If the NFL were to realign and add more teams, would you think Miami would get put in the AFC South and Indy in the AFC East? That's an interesting question. When you talk about division realignments, I think you can do geography as much as you want, but a lot of these are held together by, rivalries. And I think the fact you're asking about Miami and Indy, I think Indy in the AFC East might have some strong ties to the Patriots. As far as putting Miami in the AFC South, maybe it depends where these teams get at it. I could absolutely see that happening. You have the Jacksonville-Miami, you get the interstate rivalry there, as opposed to them going up into the Northeast. Indy was in the AFC East previously. They had, connections with the Patriots there. And I think absolutely it could work. Anthony says that's an old school fan mentality. In your opinion, I think they just, because you're not in the same division, you can't have rivalries. You're absolutely right. It's just it helps when you play 2 games a year to really solidify rivalries. That's why the strongest ones are in division. That's why the Cowboys are still in the NFC East. It's because of that rivalry kind of sense of things. And it's not to say that the rivalry with the now Commanders wouldn't still exist. It would just be lessened because, they don't play each other twice a year and there's not as much animosity between them. But I do get your point that I do absolutely think you're right that if there was realignment, again, it depends where these teams come in, but Miami could absolutely, that the Miami and Indy switch could absolutely happen. We will get to your other question, Miami, Jacksonville. Actually, you know what? We can do that one now. Miami takes on Jacksonville in Miami. Anthony asks, do I have Jacksonville upsetting Miami? I do not. I do not. And we'll get to why in a second. The reason, very simply, for why I have Miami beating Jacksonville is because the secondary in Jacksonville. I think Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle are going to do basically whatever they want against that secondary, carve them up. I actually don't have this one as a very close game. I have Jacksonville losing 16-34. That's not to say that this is a game that Jacksonville can't win. I think their offense has the capability to keep up with the Dolphins. I just don't see a world where that Jacksonville secondary is able to hold up against the weapons and Mike McDaniel's system. One more thing on that division realignment thing. Anthony says that's where I disagree. You can make the rivalry game more important if you didn't have to play them multiple times. You're right. It's just the fact that you play them every year. You play every other team once every 4 years. And that, again, takes away from some of the rivalry things. I do understand the point you're saying. And this is a good discussion. I'll have a whole segment on this later, actually. This is a really good idea. So thank you for that. But I do want to get back to this real quick. Cap for Life says 14-team PPR, Stroud, Jacobs, Achane, McBride, Rice need 2 out of 4. Sutton, Shakir, Singletary, or Coleman. Do I pick up Wilson, drop Dobbs? Which Wilson are you talking about? First of all. Second of all, you're out of the two of the 4 at the bottom. I'm going to lean towards whichever one of those Buffalo receivers you think is going to be the biggest. I might lean towards Coleman. I think both of those might have good games. And as much as I want to say Singletary, I can't trust the Giants offense right now. So we'll go with Sutton and whichever one of those Buffalo Bills wide receivers you like more. I like Coleman a little more, but they're kind of 1A, 1B right now until I see exactly how it works in the offense. I like Romeo Dobbs, but, Arizona's Wilson, I lean towards Romeo Dobbs a little more. I don't know what his target share is going to be. I have a friend who's doing fantasy. He wants to know both of his quarterbacks are young quarterbacks. One is Anthony Richardson, one is Caleb. Ooh, that is tough. I lean towards Anthony Richardson in this one, just because I like his rushing upside, but both, I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. Getting back to the predictions real quick. Arizona taking on Buffalo is actually the next one on the list. And your question about which receivers to start is a very good one, because I think this one is going to be very high scoring. I love Arizona's offense. Arizona's offense is an offense that I have a lot of shares in fantasy. I love Kyler Murray. I love Marvin Harrison. Trey McBride, I think, could be really good this year, as well as James Conner, which I have actually a lot of shares of, but he's getting slept on a little bit. As far as Buffalo goes, their defense is also a little concerning to me. They lost basically their entire secondary. Matt Milano, the heart of the defense, tears his bicep, is out for most, if not all, of the season. That is a huge loss. I still think Buffalo, who's favored by 6.5 points, is going to be able to pull this one out, but I think it's going to be very close, and I think there's a definite chance for Arizona to win this one. I have Buffalo winning 38-35 in a close one. New England at Cincinnati. Cincinnati is an 8.5 point favorite in this one. In this one, Cincinnati just is the better team. Straight up, the questions with the wide receivers right now makes it a little bit of a closer decision. T. Higgins is doubtful. That one hurts. Jamar Chase is questionable. We don't know if he's going to play because of a contract. He said he might still play, which, makes me a little more optimistic about him playing. If he plays, they win pretty easily. If not, I still think they win, but it's not going to be as much. Right now, I'm going off the assumption Jamar Chase is playing. I have them winning over New England 24-10. Anthony says, I think it's possible Jacksonville upsets Miami because they have so much tape from last year. That's a very good point, but so does Miami on Jacksonville, and that offense hasn't changed. You also say McDaniel relies so much on the middle of the field because he doesn't trust Tua to throw outside the numbers, and you're right about that. The only thing is Tyreek and Jalen Waddle are good enough receivers that's just simply not going to matter. You can't chase them across the field on crossing routes. Tua's accuracy makes it easy for him to pick apart zone defenses. It's just kind of a nightmare to go against. And I get what you're saying. Like I said, I think there's a way for them to win. I just don't trust that secondary enough. And I'm willing to eat my words. You come back on Monday. If Jacksonville wins, you can brag to me all you want, Anthony. But I just don't feel very confident in this Jacksonville defense as it stands right now. Up next, we have the rookie debut of the first overall pick, Bears Caleb Williams at home, taking on the Tennessee Titans. The Bears favored by 3.5 points. This is going to be a fun game. Will Levis and that revamped Titans offense, revamped Titans defense. I love what the Titans did this offseason, but I do think the Bears will take care of business. I think that Caleb Williams at home in front of the Bears fans, that stadium's going to be sold out. It's going to be loud. It's just not going to be in the environment for the Titans to really have their breakout. They're missing DeAndre Hopkins this week. That's going to hurt a lot. We've seen last year in Jacksonville, Calvin Ridley is not the guy that you can really put as that X receiver on the outside. He just doesn't have that same kind of separation as he does when he is in the slot, which is why I think he wasn't very good in Jacksonville. But that being said, the Bears win 24-20. Up next, not as exciting of a game, but still one I think could be close. Carolina taking on the New Orleans Saints. In New Orleans, the Saints are favored by 4 points. Again, in New Orleans, I think Bryce Young is going to have a good year. Not a year that makes the Panthers really blow up, but a year that makes the world see that Bryce Young is not a bust. That being said, this Saints defense is getting slept on a little bit. I like their offense just fine. It's not going to be a great offense. It's not going to be a bad offense. It's going to sit somewhere right in the middle. The Saints win 24-17. Then we have Pittsburgh taking on the Atlanta Falcons. The Steelers are in an interesting situation. They extend Pat Freiermuth, their tight end, a 4-year contract worth $48 million earlier today. And after naming Russell Wilson the starter, he is hurt, did not practice today, and is questionable to start against Atlanta. If I'm being completely honest, I don't think it matters. That defense is not good enough, and I think Atlanta has a lot of momentum coming in from this offseason, especially at home. That place will be loud. I'm giving this one to Atlanta. I'm assuming Justin Fields is starting too. And I personally like Justin Fields a little bit more than Russell Wilson, but neither one of them has separated a lot from each other in training camp, in the preseason, so I don't think it'll matter too much. Atlanta wins 31-14. Anthony says back to Carolina and New Orleans. He has New Orleans winning by 10 because he doesn't trust the Carolina defense. You're absolutely right. I think we're pretty much along the same lines there. I think I think that defense just isn't going to do it, and I like the Saints defense a little bit. I'm just taking that little bit of an upside as a 7-point game instead of 10 based on my belief in Bryce Young. Getting down to the back half of this schedule, Houston taking on Indy. And this is the third of these upsets that I've picked. Right now, Houston is favored by 3 points. They're coming into Indianapolis. Everyone in the world is high on them. They're coming off of an insane run. CJ Stroud coming off of one of the best rookie quarterback seasons in the history of the NFL. Heading into Anthony Richardson's house. And I am a big fan of Anthony Richardson. If you've been watching this show, you know that I put him as my dark horse pick to win MVP, which might be a little bit much. He's my third place MVP winner right now. If we go through the odds, he's my third pick to win MVP. I really like this Colts team. I think this is going to be a close game, but I think Indy's going to pull this one out at home, winning 21-23. Then less of an exciting game, but also I think a close game. The Chargers taking on the Las Vegas Raiders in LA. Chargers currently favored by 3. That's that home field advantage, that 2.5-point advantage. Otherwise, it probably would be a pick'em. I am leaning towards the Chargers. The Chargers don't usually do good in tight games, but both of these teams are bad. Point blank period, both of these teams are bad. I like the Gardner Minshew with Devontae Adams connection. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Outside of that, there's not much. The Chargers defense, not great. Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins are the only thing to look forward to on that Raiders defense, and they should eat against this Chargers line, but the Chargers are going to run the ball a lot, and I think it's going to be just enough to win this game. 24-26, the Chargers start off the Jim Harbaugh era with a win. Heading to Seattle for a Denver Broncos Seattle Seahawks game. The Seahawks are favored by 6 points. The Denver Broncos, Bo Nix, starting as a rookie, the first rookie to start in the Broncos uniform since John Elway, all the way back in the 1980s. It's been a long time, but Bo Nix played his way into that job. I still don't think they're going to be a very good team, but Bo Nix looks solid. He knows what he's doing. Cortland Sutton seems like a good weapon. There are going to be a lot of checkdowns. A lot of checkdowns in this game. I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball very well. Mike McDonald, former defensive coordinator of the Ravens, comes over as the head coach. I really like him. I like the scheme he has, and I think Seattle, under his scheme, could return to form defensively. I think this is just not a good matchup in the first game for Bo Nix and the Broncos, as the Broncos fall 10-27. Then we get Dallas versus Cleveland. And this line was shocking to me. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. This line is shocking to me. Real quick, Anthony says, I think Jim Harbaugh is going to try and prove a point in his first game, and the Chargers are going to win, and it's going to be a blowout. I just don't believe in this Chargers team enough for it to be a blowout. In fact, I think the Raiders might even be a better team, if only slightly, but I do think that Jim Harbaugh debut is going to be able to push them over to a win. So I like your reasoning there, Anthony. But getting back to Dallas at Cleveland, this game is shocking to me. This is the fourth of the 4 upsets that I've picked. Dallas is an underdog. I know it's in Cleveland, but that Dallas offense is going to do its thing regardless of how good this Cleveland defense is. Myles Garrett might be able to slow them down, But this is still a really good Dallas offense. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb. There's just no way they can cover them all game long. I know that running game is a little bit weaker, but I have Dallas winning 28-21. Cleveland favored by 2.5. I just simply don't get that one. Again, I don't really see a way that Cleveland wins this game. I don't trust their offense. I don't trust Deshaun Watson until he proves to me that he can play football again. I'm just not going to trust him. So Dallas, that's the fourth of the four underdog picks that I have for this game, which leaves two games remaining on Sunday. Washington taking on Tampa Bay in Tampa. Jaden Daniels' debut game, not at home. This Washington defense is going to be an issue. Real quick before we get into that, Anthony says he has Cleveland winning this game. He doesn't trust Dallas for some odd reason, which I understand. Dallas lost a lot of talent. He's not sure if the consistency of the running game or the linebackers on the defensive side. I would lean more towards the running game. I don't trust that running game led by Zeke, Dalvin Cook, and Rico Dowdle. I don't really trust any of those guys. But the offensive line is better. That defense is going to be just fine. They have Trayvon Diggs back. They lose Deron Bland, but they were able to survive without Trayvon Diggs last time. And I think that offensive line is going to be just fine. Zeke isn't going to go out and rush for 100 yards. None of those guys are, but they'll be able to get you 30 to 50, and their passing game can do the rest. But getting back to Washington at Tampa, Jaden Daniels is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I am so excited for Jaden Daniels this season. I want to see what he can do against Tampa. Mike Evans kills it against Washington every single time they play. Look for him to have a huge game with Baker Mayfield. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers take game one as 3.5-point favorites, 17-23. And finally, the last game of the Sunday slate, a rematch of the Matthew Stafford Bowl from the playoffs last year. The Rams head back to Detroit. Detroit is a 4.5-point favorite. Sunday Night Football, Matt Stafford back to Detroit for just the second time ever. This one should be a lot of fun. In the playoffs, it was a 1-point game coming down to the stretch. I think it's going to be very similar. I love what Detroit did this offseason. They brought in Tim Patrick. I think he's going to be huge as a second wide receiver. I'm not sure if they're going to call him up for the practice squad or not. Amon-Ra St. Brown, going to do his thing. That rushing game, going to do their thing, especially on an Aaron Donald-less defensive line. And I think that's going to be the difference in this game. I would lean Los Angeles because they got healthier, but I like the defensive moves by Detroit as well. And the lack of Aaron Donald makes this push, in my opinion, a little bit more in the favor of Detroit. I have Detroit winning 24-30. But let me know about anything you guys, any of these games you guys thought. I only picked two teams to win on the road, and one of them is in Brazil. So really only one true road game I picked as the road team to win, which is a little interesting. But, home field advantage is a real thing in the NFL. So we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to predict some college football games. I got 10 of those. It's a little bit less than this segment. We're going to go over the biggest 10 games that I can think of for this week, talk about some upsets, what I think they're going to do, and some score predictions as well. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. It is Friday, September 6th. Football is back. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the entire NFL slate other than Monday Night Football, including the game tonight in Sao Paulo, Brazil, between the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles, a game that I had the Packers winning 31-28. In this segment, we are going to do a few more predictions, this time taking our attention to the college football world as week 2 heats up. There are a bunch of really good games, a couple games that might have upset potential. We're going to talk about all of them in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, spending your Friday talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some college football preview predictions. I got 10 games hot off the press for you guys. And we're going to start off in what I think is going to be one of the more intriguing matchups of all of Saturday, that being Boise State taking on number 7 Oregon. What makes this one so intriguing to me is obviously I went to I went to a group of 5 school that I think has a chance of making the playoffs. So paying attention to some of these group of 5 contenders like Boise State is something that I'm just keeping my eye on in the past, just in general. But also, Ashton Jeanty coming off of a 267-yard, 6-touchdown game. The Oregon Ducks coming off a game where they almost lost to Idaho, an FCS school, only escaping with a 10-point victory, which would have been one of the biggest upsets in the history of college football. At one point, only being up 3 points in that fourth quarter. Not where you want to be as a program that was ranked number 3 in the nation heading into week 1. But this game should be a lot of fun. Part of why Oregon was struggling so much was their offensive line, was their lack of being able to get a run game. They had 2.9 yards per carry against Idaho, and the offensive line was not helpful in that. Their defense, as you expect, was able to do their thing against an FCS opponent. It's going to be interesting when you go up against a Boise State team that they put up almost 60 points against a scrappy Sun Belt team. The Sun Belt is one of the best group of 5 conferences, and that was a great game. Now, I do think Ashton Jeanty isn't going to be able to run for 300 yards and 6 touchdowns against this Oregon defense, but I would need to see more out of this offense as far as finishing drives. Threw the ball for 50 times for 350 yards, but they were only able to put up 24 points. It's not what you want to see if you're Oregon. This is a big bounce back game. I think they'll be able to do it, although this one is absolutely on upset alert. Right now, Oregon is favored by 21 points. I think they will cover. Maybe. I think this Oregon defense is going to do enough against Boise State, and that Boise State defense did not look very good. This is going to be a shootout of a game. If the Oregon defense can step up, they'll win. This is either going to be a 21-45 game, something like that, or it's going to be like a 55-62 game, right? These two offenses will get things done, whether it's because the defense on the other side is bad or because that offense is simply good. It's going to be a really fun game to watch. High scoring. I'm very excited for this one. I do have Oregon winning, though. Up next, maybe the biggest game of the week. Number 3 Texas heads up to the Big House to take on number 10 Michigan, a Michigan team that I am a lot lower on. Their 2 quarterbacks didn't look good. Neither Warren or Orji looked very good last week against Fresno State, only able to put up 30 points total. One of them was a pick 6 to really seal the game. Texas looked really good. I think Texas, who is currently favored by 7 points, is able to go up into the Big House one of the best home field advantages in all of college sports, and take care of business. This is only the second ever meeting between these two programs. The last one, Texas won by 1 point on a 38-37 victory in 2005, almost 20 years ago at this point. This one should be a lot of fun. I'm leaning towards Texas, though, 31-20. Arkansas taking on Oklahoma State, number 16 Oklahoma State. They beat they beat the best FCS school last week. Oklahoma State does 44-20. They do their job. Ollie Gordon, 3 touchdowns, cementing himself firmly in that Heisman race with a couple of other guys, Ashton Genty, Tetroa McMullen, T-Mac over there in Arizona, Travis Hunter, who we'll talk a little bit about later, but Heisman race has a lot of ways to go. Cam Ward in Miami. Arkansas won 70-0 against Pine Bluff. They're a team that won 4 games last year. Do I think that they're going to be able to beat Oklahoma State? No. Do I think they'll be able to get within that 10-point spread that is currently at? Absolutely. If this is a game that I think is primed for upset potential. I think if the Arkansas defense is real, that's when we're going to see, because it's a little tough when you're comparing, South Dakota State to Arkansas Pine Bluff. One of those teams is a lot better than the other. I'm still leaning towards Oklahoma State, 27-41, although this is another game that could be very close. Up next, Kansas State taking on Tulane. K-State, the number 17 ranked team in the nation, 9-point favorites. Tulane is another one of those group of 5 teams that are vying for that 12 seed in the college football playoffs. They looked really good in week 1 after losing their coach, losing their quarterback, losing a lot of people to the transfer portal. They win 55-0. Good job by Tulane. I think this one's going to be close. I think Tulane, especially at home in New Orleans, is going to be able to put up a bit of a fight. I think Tulane still falls in this one, but I think they get within 9, make it a close game, 30-24, Kansas State able to hold off one of the best group of 5 teams in the nation. And this is another one that I think is interesting. Number 23, Georgia Tech, heading into New York to take on the Syracuse Orange. Syracuse picks up Kyle McCord, former starter at Ohio State last year. He looked really good in week 1. I know everyone kind of piled on Kyle McCord as a freshman. He was a freshman last year. He looked comfortable in week 1 as a Syracuse Orange, passing for over 300 yards. It's going to be good if he can click. This Syracuse team has the potential to be a dark horse ACC candidate when we talk about the way the ACC is looking with, Miami at the top, Florida State falling. I like Louisville a lot, but outside of Miami, there's not really a clear number 2. Is it going to be Syracuse? Is it going to be Georgia Tech? Is it going to be NC State? Is it going to be Louisville? Which one of these guys is going to claim that number 2 spot in the ACC? This is going to be a huge game to figure that out, and I'm leaning towards Syracuse in this one. I think Syracuse's defense looked really good. Georgia Tech has been really impressive, but I think Syracuse is going to be able to slow down that run game. If they can deal with a running quarterback, which has been the reason why Haynes King and the rest of Georgia Tech has started off 2-0, and I'm becoming less and less impressed by that Florida State win as time continues. I definitely think Georgia Tech is better than Boston College, but Boston College even looked better against Florida State than Georgia Tech did, which is a little shocking to me. But all of that said, I think Syracuse is going to pull this upset off, winning 23-21 at home. This is going to be a really good game this week as well. Then we get an in-state rivalry between Iowa and Iowa State. Iowa coming off a 40-point performance. They haven't put up that many points in like 30 years. It's a bit of a hyperbole there, but it's been a long time since Iowa's offense has been able to do much of anything. They put up 40 points. Cade McNamara, the 5th-year transfer coming into Iowa, going with that vaunted defense. No one in this matchup that lost in the last 5 years has scored more than 17 points. this is going to be a low-scoring game. Both of these teams have great defenses. Iowa State is returning more offensive production than anybody else in the entire country. Iowa is ranked number 21 in the nation after putting up points, and I am not one to shy away from an Iowa team that can score points. I think it's going to be a little harder to score points when you go up against Iowa State as opposed to an FCS team, but I do think they still get this win, 20-14. They're currently 3-point favorites. Then we get another fun one. Virginia Tech taking on Marshall. Virginia Tech is a 20.5-point favorite in this one, even after a loss to Vanderbilt in overtime. Kyron Drones had cramps at the end of the game, which is why he wasn't able to play. If he's fully healthy, they have a much better chance. He looked really good, going for over 300 yards. Is Virginia Tech real? They had a lot of hype coming into it. We talked about dark horse ACC candidates. Virginia Tech was arguably supposed to be that number 2, number 3. A lot of people had them in the college football playoffs, which I personally think is ridiculous. It's a little easier for me to say that out loud now that they've lost to Vanderbilt, but that's besides the point. Marshall is a very good Sun Belt team. I talk about the Sun Belt a lot. I went to James Madison University, member of the Sun Belt. I know the Sun Belt pretty good. This Virginia Tech team and this Marshall team match up pretty good against each other. I don't necessarily think Marshall's going to win. I do think 20 is a lot of points to be giving to Marshall. I'm taking Virginia Tech to win by just about 10-14. 35-21 is what I have written down, but I definitely think 20 is too much. Marshall is a scrappy, competitive team, and their defense is nothing to scoff at. Then we have one of the other big... These next 3 games are all really good. Another ranked matchup between Tennessee, number 14, and number 24, NC State. Tennessee is coming off a great game. Nico Loma-Leva looks awesome in Tennessee as a freshman. NC State did not look that good. They bring in Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina. And again, Coastal, a Sun Belt school. Grayson McCall is incredibly overrated. Incredibly overrated. He's a fine quarterback, but he's incredibly overrated. NC State's going to lose this one in very convincing fashion. 42-14, Tennessee kicks NC State out of the top 25. Colorado taking on Nebraska. Nebraska is a 6-point favorite. Is Colorado's offensive line going to be better? Are they going to be able to run the ball? That offense is going to be able to get those explosive plays. We saw it against a really good North Dakota State defense. A solid North Dakota State offense, although I think Nebraska's offense is better, might be the difference. Dylan Raiola, young Mahomes, like he wants to be called, versus Shadur Sanders. It should be a lot of fun. I'm leaning towards Nebraska, 35-31. And the last game I wanted to talk about from this college football schedule is Clemson taking on App State at home. Clemson coming off of a shellacking from the number 1 team in the nation, Georgia. App State's really good. Again, another Sun Belt team. They're one of those group of 5 schools that I think could get that spot. Joey Aguilar, really, really underrated quarterback in the Sun Belt, has been with App State for a while. That Clemson defense, I think, was really impressive, especially in that first half against Georgia, holding them to just 6 points. I want to see if that offense can do things. I think that 16.5-point spread is a little much. I think App State has a real chance to win this game. I'm still going to give Clemson the benefit of the doubt because they went up against Georgia, but I need to see that offense do things. Clemson wins this one 27-30. A close game to end out our top 10 college games. Let me know if there's any game that I missed, any of these games that I predicted that you think I'm just dead wrong on. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to finish off our show doing our MLB Power Rankings. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, September 6th. I appreciate everybody sticking around, talking some sports with me today. We just finished talking about, if you are just tuning in, a bunch of the top 10 college football games for me this week. We went over games like Texas taking on Michigan, Tennessee taking on NC State, Colorado taking on Nebraska, and a bunch of other top matchups. In this segment, we are going to finish off our show with our Friday special, the official Sports by GSMC Podcast Network MLB Power Rankings. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. You can also do the same thing if you are on YouTube using that super chat feature. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all you would like to ask, feel free to throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we're going to finish off, our show today talking all about the MLB. It's been about a week since we got into the MLB Power Rankings. Hot off the presses today, the official Sports by GSMC Podcast Network MLB Power Rankings. Starting off at number 30, who else but the Chicago White Sox? The White Sox once again find themselves at the bottom of the power rankings. They are all but guaranteed to be the worst team in the modern MLB, currently sitting at just below 110 losses. Not where you want to be if you're a White Sox fan, right? This is an MLB team that is trying not to catch up to the 62 Mets, although it might be just a formality at this point, as they currently have 109 losses, 48 games back. It's kind of ridiculous how bad this team has been. At 29, the Miami Marlins. The Miami Marlins are the next team to be eliminated. They currently are one of just 3 teams, as well as the Colorado Rockies, who have been eliminated from the playoffs with their buddies, the White Sox. It's a shame. These teams are bad. The Marlins really fell. They made the playoffs last year. Unfortunately, just not a good team. Injuries kind of hit them hard. They traded away some of their best pieces. Miami is at 29, and the Rockies are at 28. At 27, we have the Los Angeles Angels, and they are the next team on that chopping block. Very, very close to elimination. They're the next team probably to be eliminated. And we have a change at 25. It's been a bit since a new team, or at 26. It's been a bit since a new team was in the bottom 5. Welcome into the bottom 5, my Washington Nationals. The Nationals have been bad. They fall 3 spots from number 23. I was overrating them a little bit. I'll be completely honest with you. They called up Dylan Cruz. I was very excited. The Nationals fall 3 spots to number 26. At 25, the Oakland Athletics climb a spot. I've been kind of disrespecting them just a little bit. They have the second best record in the AL since the All-Star break. They still technically have a path to win the AL West. It's going to be tight, but they're not out of it yet. The Athletics are at 25. At 24, the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pirates, outside of Paul Skeens and a couple of their other pitchers, have been bad. They've moved to a 6-man rotation to reduce innings on some of their arms. Their season is done. They're all but out of it as well. Same thing with the Cincinnati Reds. Although the Reds are still kicking a little bit, they still are trying their best, trying to say they got a little bit of hope left, but they are basically done. The Reds 8.5 games out of that wild card spot. Really, if you're not in the top 4 in the NL right now, you don't really have much of a shot unless the Cubs or the Cardinals really go on a hot streak towards the end of the season. The Blue Jays stand pat at 22. The Blue Jays, I mean, they've been solid over the last week. They did their job against the Red Sox, but they're ultimately not going to be able to do much. They are sitting pat at 22. At 21, the Giants drop 4 spots. They have had a disaster week, and the Giants love doing this. They love having a great week and then a disaster week and then a great week and then a disaster week, which really makes them go up and down 4 spots a whole bunch. The Giants are 3-7 in their last 10 after being 8-2 in their last 10 previously. Giants fall 4 spots to 21. At spot 20, we have the Tampa Bay Rays. The Tampa Bay Rays are punting on this season. Junior Caminero comes up. He looks up to Manny Machado. They got to play each other. Makes me feel old. Just a little bit. Some of these guys playing in the MLB are younger than me now, which a little bit of a scary thought. But the Rays fall 1 spot to 20. The Cardinals also fall a spot to number 19. They just haven't been doing that good. Their moves at the trade deadline just have not paid off. The Rangers climbed 2 spots after beating the Yankees in a series. Wyatt Langford looked really good. Too bad the reigning champs have not been that good all season, and he's been a little inconsistent. A walk-off grand slam and a home run robbery to end the game is about as good of a series as you can possibly have if you are Wyatt Langford. The Tigers climb 4 spots to number 17, and don't look now. The Tigers are not out of it. They're currently 5 games out of a wild card spot, tied for the first team out of that wild card spot with the team ahead of them, the Seattle Mariners. The Tigers have been hot recently. This last week, they cooled down just a little bit, but this is a Tigers team that I've been sleeping on. They are creeping their way in, and some of those teams that hold that wild card spot right now, we'll get to them in a second, are starting to slip. The Red Sox at 15 are back to 500 where they always deserve to be. 70-70, perfectly balanced at that number 15 spot. This is exactly what we needed. The season can end right now. The Red Sox will finish 81-81. At 14, the Chicago Cubs climb 1 spot, switching with the Chicago Red Sox. The Cubs have been hot, 7-3 in their last 10. They pitched a combined no-hitter. Shota Imanaga and 2 relief pitchers came in and no-hit the Pirates just the other night. They're hot too. They're not completely out of the race. 4.5 games back of the Braves and the Mets. And speaking of the AL wildcard race, we have those next 2 teams. The Kansas City Royals and the Minnesota Twins are the 2 teams right ahead of the Tigers and the Mariners. The Royals have been bad. They dropped 7 in a row earlier this week. They were able to pick one up to stop their skid, but after going on a hot streak, catching the Guardians for a second, they have started falling. So has everyone else in the AL for some reason, but it's getting a little bit chippy there. You got to be careful if you're the Kansas City Royals. You don't want to choke this playoff spot away. And same thing with the Twins. They're only half a game up on the Royals, 5.5 up on the Detroit Tigers. They fall a spot, a little bit concerned for them. The Astros also fall a spot. They're down out of the top 10 to the 11 spot on this list. It's not really anything that they've done. It's more the fact that the NL East, the top of the NL East, has been incredibly hot this week, including the Braves going 6-4, almost falling out of that wild card spot, currently tied for that 3rd wild card spot with the New York Mets. The New York Mets tied with the Braves. Can they hold this spot? They're 8-2 in their last 10. I believe they're on an 8-game winning streak. The Mets have not been able to lose since Grimace showed up. It's kind of insane. The Mets are up 4 spots to number 9. The Diamondbacks, down 3 spot from the top 5 to number 8. They've cooled down a little bit. They get their first baseman back. I'd like to see a little bit of Josh Bell, even though, first baseman is healthy again. He kind of helped turn their whole season around. The Padres stand pat at 7. Fernando Tatis is back. And oh my God, I forgot Fernando Tatis was even gone with how good they were playing. They get Joe Musgrave back. He's been pitching phenomenally. They get Yu Darvish back. This team is only getting stronger heading into the postseason. They're going to make some noise this season. At 6, the Guardians. They had a little bit of a scare. Thought they might lose the division there for a second to the Royals. But they're back on top, back up on that division by 4 games over the Twins, 4.5 over the Kansas City Royals. The Guardians stay in the top 10 at number 6. At number 5, the Brewers find their way into the top 5. Sneaky 80-game winner right now. They are fighting for that number 1 seed in the NL, just 3 games back of the Phillies and the Dodgers. There's a real shot that they could get that in a very, very tight NL race this year. The Yankees fall a spot to number 4, are down in the division as well. At least they were this morning. They currently tied. I guess they won today. The Yankees and the Orioles are battling to not lose, to not lose that division. They're not battling to win right now. They're battling to not lose, and neither one is really running away with it. And that gives us the Orioles at number 3. They're above the Yankees just because they were ahead of the standings this morning. And then at number 2, we have the Dodgers, and number 1, we have the Phillies. Both of these teams have the best record in baseball, 84 and 56. The Phillies have just simply been hotter over the last 10, but only barely. The Phillies are 8-2. The Dodgers are 7-3. The Dodgers lose Clayton Kershaw. These two teams are really, really good. Best teams in baseball. The Phillies get that number 1 spot over the Dodgers just because that extra win in the last 10. But let me know what you think of these power rankings. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we talked about today. I know it was a little bit of a longer episode, but let me know what you thought. Let me know what your thoughts are on anything we talked about today. We'll be back on Monday. I hope everybody has a great weekend. I hope everybody watches lots of football, enjoys the sports. We'll be back breaking down college football, the NFL, do NFL power rankings, Monday Night Football preview, college football power rankings, top 25. Lots of stuff to cover on Monday, so make sure you swing back after you all have a great weekend. Then I will see you on Monday, same time, same place. You all have a good one. Good night.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of dream. I'm gonna feel like it's gonna be a bad day.